The idea that the human brain can reduce inflammation in the body by up to 70% might seem like something pulled from the pages of futuristic medical fiction. Yet modern neuroscience has illuminated a fascinating truth. The brain is not merely an organ of thought and perception, but an active regulator of immune activity and inflammatory responses throughout the body. This discovery, which has steadily gained empirical evidence over the past few decades, represents one of the most significant paradigm shifts in our understanding of human physiology. It challenges long-held assumptions that the immune system operates independently of the nervous system, revealing instead a delicate, dynamic conversation between neurons and immune cells. This evolving understanding opens the door to new forms of treatment for chronic diseases, autoimmune disorders, metabolic conditions, and even mental health challenges. To appreciate the profound implications of a brain capable of reducing systemic inflammation, it is crucial to journey through the scientific developments that have led to this moment and explore how this discovery alters everything from therapeutic strategies to how we conceptualize mind-body interaction. Researchers first began noticing strange patterns in inflammation studies decades ago, when animals with specific nerve fibers severed displayed elevated inflammatory markers compared to controls. These early observations hinted at a neuroimmune connection, but lacked a clear mechanism. For many years, immunologists operated on the belief that the immune system, largely autonomous, responded only to pathogens and internal cues such as cytokines, stress hormones, or biochemical signals. Meanwhile, neuroscientists focused primarily on the brain's role in cognition, movement, memory, and emotion. The two domains, though inherently intertwined, were rarely studied together. But as technology advanced, particularly molecular imaging, optogenetics, and neural tracing tools, scientists gained the ability to map communication pathways between organs at an unprecedented level. Among the individuals who pushed this frontier forward was the neuroscientist Kevin Tracey, who made a groundbreaking discovery in the late 1990s. He found that stimulating the vagus nerve in rats reduced the release of tumor necrosis factor, TNF, a key inflammatory cytokine. In other words, electrical signals from the brain could directly regulate inflammation at the molecular level. This finding cracked open an entirely new field, bioelectronic medicine, which explores how neural circuits can be modulated to control immune function. Tracey's experiments revealed what is now known as the inflammatory reflex, a neuroimmune feedback loop in which the vagus nerve acts as a communication superhighway between the brain and immune cells. When activated, this reflex can dampen the body's inflammatory response by up to 70%, significantly reducing cytokine release. The discovery was nothing short of revolutionary. The vagus nerve, which stretches from the brainstem to the gut, heart, lungs, and nearly every major organ, has long been known to influence digestion, respiration, and heart rate. But understanding that it also communicates with immune cells and can switch inflammatory activity on and off represented an entirely new conceptual framework. It meant that inflammation was not simply a chemical storm unfolding in isolation. It was a process monitored and modulated by the nervous system, with the brain acting as a command center capable of issuing neural signals to control immune behavior. As scientific interest grew, researchers began mapping the exact roots of this inflammatory reflex. Immune cells, particularly macrophages, were discovered to carry receptors for acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter released by vagus nerve fibers. When acetylcholine binds to these receptors, it inhibits the release of pro-inflammatory cytokines. This cholinergic anti-inflammatory pathway, as it is known, has been found to play a major role in preventing runaway inflammation, a central feature in conditions such as rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's disease, sepsis, asthma, and even neurodegenerative disorders. The brain, through these circuits, is able to detect inflammation occurring anywhere in the body and send immediate counter-signaling to keep it within safe limits. What's even more compelling is that this regulatory pathway operates with remarkable precision. It does not suppress the immune system entirely, as drugs like steroids do. Instead, it fine-tunes the inflammatory response, preserving the body's ability to fight infection while preventing excessive damage. Understanding that the brain can reduce inflammation by up to 70% has spurred an explosion of research into therapies that activate this pathway. One of the most promising approaches is vagus nerve stimulation, VNS, which involves sending mild electrical pulses through the nerve to activate anti-inflammatory signaling. VNS has already been used for years to treat epilepsy and depression, but researchers soon discovered that it also significantly reduces inflammatory markers. In clinical trials involving rheumatoid arthritis patients, VNS led to dramatic improvements in joint swelling, pain levels, and cytokine profiles. The results were so compelling that several biotechnology companies began developing miniature implantable devices designed to stimulate the vagus nerve at precise intervals, effectively allowing patients to regulate their inflammation in real time. Unlike pharmaceuticals, which often come with side effects and systemic consequences, bioelectronic modulation targets the body's natural pathways, leveraging its own regulatory mechanisms. Yet the brain's ability to reduce inflammation is not limited to electrical stimulation alone. Behavioral and psychological factors also influence the inflammatory reflex, reinforcing the idea that the mind and body function as an integrated system. Stress, for example, has long been known to exacerbate inflammation, but it was only recently that scientists discovered the neural mechanisms underlying this effect. Chronic stress impairs vagus nerve activity while amplifying sympathetic nervous system activity, leading to elevated inflammatory cytokines. Conversely, practices that enhance vagal tone, such as deep breathing, meditation, yoga, mindfulness, singing, and even cold exposure, have been shown to activate the cholinergic anti-inflammatory pathway. This explains why these practices can reduce inflammation, improve immune function, and even alleviate symptoms of autoimmune disorders. In other words, the brain can be trained intentionally and through regular practice to increase its ability to regulate inflammation. The implications of this are profound. It suggests that lifestyle interventions, when designed to enhance vagus nerve function, could serve as powerful tools for preventing and managing inflammatory conditions. For example, structured breathing techniques activate the diaphragm in a way that stimulates vagal afferents, sending calming signals to the brain that ultimately reduce inflammatory cytokine production. Slow, rhythmic breathing, particularly exhalation-focused patterns, has been shown to increase vagal tone in both healthy individuals and patients with chronic illnesses. Studies involving mindfulness meditation have demonstrated reductions in C-reactive protein, CRP, one of the most important biomarkers of systemic inflammation. These findings suggest that mental activity can shape immune activity through neurological pathways, providing a biological foundation for the mind-body connection that ancient traditions have long described. What once sounded metaphysical or anecdotal now has neural circuitry as a mechanistic explanation. Another fascinating aspect of the brain's influence on inflammation lies in the gut-brain immune axis. The gut microbiome, which contains trillions of microorganisms, communicates directly with the brain via the vagus nerve. Changes in gut bacteria can increase or decrease inflammation depending on their composition. When beneficial bacteria flourish, they produce metabolites such as short-chain fatty acids that stimulate vagal pathways and reduce inflammatory cytokines. Conversely, a disrupted microbiome, or dysbiosis, can send distress signals to the brain that amplify inflammation. This reciprocal relationship underscores how diet, probiotics, and gut health strategies can indirectly modulate brain-mediated anti-inflammatory responses. Neuroscientists now recognize that this gut-brain communication loop plays a major role not only in physical health, but also in mental states such as anxiety, depression, and cognitive function, all of which are influenced by inflammatory levels. Moving deeper into brain-immune interactions, the central nervous system also contains microglia, specialized immune cells that maintain neural health. Microglial activation can contribute to neuroinflammation, which in turn influences systemic inflammation. When the brain experiences chronic stress, injury, or infection, microglia may become hyperactive, releasing inflammatory molecules that disrupt neural communication and amplify inflammation throughout the body. Understanding how the brain regulates microglial activity is another emerging frontier. Certain forms of cognitive training, exercise, and pharmacological approaches have been shown to calm microglial overactivation, thereby reducing inflammation both in the brain and peripherally. Exercise, for example, increases brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, which helps regulate microglia and reduces neuroinflammation. This could explain why exercise consistently lowers systemic inflammation and supports immune health, offering yet another example of how brain-centric processes influence the entire body. One of the most intriguing aspects of the brain's ability to reduce inflammation is the specificity with which neural circuits engage the immune system. Researchers have discovered that the vagus nerve uses distinct branches to influence different organs, and electrical stimulation can be fine-tuned to activate specific pathways. This opens up the possibility of highly targeted treatments, where inflammation in one organ, such as the pancreas in diabetes or the intestinal tract in Crohn's disease, could be controlled through precise neurostimulation. This therapeutic strategy has been likened to nerve-based precision medicine, a field expected to expand rapidly in the coming decade. The potential applications are vast, reducing inflammation in cardiovascular disease, mitigating organ rejection in transplant patients, preventing cytokine storms in conditions like COVID-19, and improving metabolic function in obesity-related inflammation. Furthermore, new research in psychoneuroimmunology has shown that the brain can actually learn to modulate inflammation. In conditioning experiments, patients exposed to a particular taste paired with an anti-inflammatory medication eventually displayed reduced inflammation merely from the taste alone, even when the drug was absent. This form of immune conditioning demonstrates that the brain stores learned associations that influence immune responses, much like Pavlov's dogs salivated in response to a bell. The implication is profound. Immune responses can be modified by expectation, learning, and memory, meaning the brain can be trained, voluntarily or involuntarily, to regulate inflammation in predictable ways. This discovery blurs the boundaries between neurology, psychology, and immunology, offering unprecedented control over physiological processes. The broader societal implications of a brain capable of dramatically reducing inflammation extend beyond individual health. Chronic inflammation contributes to a vast array of modern diseases, including heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, depression, obesity, asthma, psoriasis, arthritis, and many forms of cancer. If the brain can be harnessed to reduce inflammation safely and naturally, healthcare could shift toward a more integrated, non-pharmacological approach. This could lighten the burden on medical systems, reduce dependence on drugs with harmful side effects, and promote long-term wellness through neural and behavioral strategies. The integration of neuroscience with immunology also challenges outdated models of medical specialization. Rather than treating organs or systems in isolation, future medicine may adopt a network-based approach, recognizing that the brain, immune system, endocrine system, and microbiome operate as an interconnected whole. However, despite the excitement, this field remains in early stages. Much remains to be understood about the variability between individuals, the long-term effects of neural stimulation, and the best ways to integrate lifestyle, behavioral, and technological interventions. Not everyone responds equally to vagus nerve stimulation or mind-body practices. Genetic factors, trauma history, microbiome diversity, and environmental influences all shape the neuroimmune response. Moreover, While the brain can dampen inflammation dramatically, it may not always be able to counteract severe pathological triggers such as overwhelming infection, autoimmune dysfunction, or chronic toxin exposure. Scientists are working to map the limits of the inflammatory reflex, refine stimulation techniques, and identify biomarkers that predict responsiveness. Nevertheless, the evidence thus far is overwhelmingly promising. In many individuals, activating the brain's anti-inflammatory pathways, whether through technology, breathing, meditation, biofeedback, diet, or exercise, leads to measurable reductions in inflammatory markers and improvements in symptoms. Patients with rheumatoid arthritis, inflammatory bowel disease, chronic pain, depression, and even long COVID have reported significant benefits from interventions that target vagus nerve function. The convergence of neuroscience, immunology, and behavioral science represents a historic shift toward understanding the body as a single integrated system influenced deeply by the brain. Perhaps the most inspiring aspect of this discovery is the sense of agency it provides. For centuries, inflammation has been viewed as a passive force, something that simply happens to us. Now we know that the brain possesses the power to modulate it, meaning human beings are not merely at the mercy of their immune system. Through intentional practices, thoughtful lifestyle choices, and emerging technologies, individuals can actively engage the neural circuits that regulate inflammation. This understanding transforms health from a reactive endeavor into a proactive one, empowering people to support their immune systems through both their behavior and their thoughts. As research continues, the vision of treating chronic inflammatory conditions through brain-based therapies becomes more tangible. Hospitals may one day prescribe vagus nerve stimulation devices much like they currently prescribe medications. Insurance companies may recognize meditation or breath training programs as legitimate medical treatments. Physicians could evaluate vagal tone as routinely as they check blood pressure. And individuals will increasingly understand that the mind is not separate from the body, but a critical participant in immune regulation. The discovery that the brain can reduce inflammation by up to 70% is more than a scientific breakthrough. It is a shift in how we understand ourselves. It reveals intelligence not only in our thinking, but in our biology, showing that the body possesses built-in mechanisms for healing and homeostasis that we are only beginning to comprehend. This insight will undoubtedly influence medicine, psychology, neuroscience, public health, and personal well-being for generations to come.